Right. Morning, morning. Welcome, everybody. Another wonderful, bright, sunny, but rather fresh morning here in Joburg. But all good, all good. So there's Mpulela. He's just changed names quickly. Quick re-identification exercise. So that's excellent. So at least we know who he is. So fantastic. Welcome to you all this morning. Lee is not going to be joining us this morning. So she tossed the hot potato over to Trevor and me, and we thought we'd just reassign it to Steve. So we'll just we'll just pick it up as it goes this morning. Yeah, she's off facilitating some training this morning, which is fantastic, and so it's over to the team this morning. So right, Trevor, you want to kick this thing off? You reckon you can do it?
Right. What is the subject?
Hashtag Black Lives Matter.
Nice try.
All right. Yeah. Well, look. Let me kick it off. I think Lee raising it was obvious in our discussions over the last couple of weeks. We've ignored the elephant in the global room, as it were. If you're watching anything on the news, it's all to do with the protests that are happening worldwide. And I'm sure she threw the thing to say, well, look, we're an intelligent bunch around here, apart from one or two. I'm not going to mention any names. Steve, I like your smile, yes. What do we feel about it? So what do I feel? A couple of thoughts go around in my head. I think context is very important in this. And I fully understand the context of what's happening in America, of a growing minority that has been subjugated via or through historical issues and are fast becoming the majority. And people that have had traditional power resistant to allowing that power to be reduced. And then I think back to our own context here, and I think our context is slightly different, although I understand the background and the history and 400 years of subjugation of a large group of people. And I think I have an understanding for where people are coming from. I also think we've had 25 years here locally of the context changing. Because if you break it down into race classifications, our majority has been a majority black, and there's a minority of everyone else. And I don't care what anyone says. Someone will interpret something as being insensitive. But I think our grouping has turned around and said, you know what? We've suddenly recognized, and I've been at pains to point out that each one sharing their story has shown just how deep individual stories really are and how inspiring they are. And I've continually mentioned, when you walk out there, just recognize that there are 50 million other people just in our country that have stories just like ours. And so for me, that eradicates any skin color. So, I hear inputs and comments. I had this thought going across my head that it's not about Black Lives Matter or White Lives Matter, but that is insensitive. And I've had this thought, all lives matter. And I think we've got to try and get to the point of view where human beings matter. So I have these contradictory thoughts all around, but I suppose that's enough to get started on, so Steve can try and analyze what's going on. I think we are all about contradictions, and this race classification thing. The biggest surprise to me in this country is that 25 years ago, we never got rid of, on all our paperwork, race classifications. And I haven't really dug in deep as to why we still have on little forms here in South Africa, race classifications of white, black, colored, Indian, and all that sort of nonsense. We could have led the world already by just blanket having us all identified as human beings. Let me leave it there.
Hey, thanks, Trevor. I think an interesting introduction. So let's pick it up from there. So Umpulela, I'm going to pick on you first. So let's come across to you and hear what your thoughts are on this. And yeah.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. I have to say that it's a very difficult one. I think I sat very long last night. I think until about 2 o'clock trying to put my mind around how do you take such a big subject and try and sort of put it into a few words in a short space of time. So that's what the difficulty was. Obviously, what's happening in America and what happened to Mr. Floyd is quite painful. It's actually very difficult to watch the video because just to think that somebody else feels enough power to have to put another life under a knee like that, it's a very, very difficult thing. It obviously speaks to some of the humiliation in the past that Black people went through in this country. And obviously that we're going through a healing process and hopefully we get it right. And I think for me, maybe I'll start it there, is to say, from what the past was, there was a need to have a healing process. And I'm not sure whether we have gone through the process as we should. I think in some instances we've sort of hoped and believe that magically things will just fall into place on their own, which is fine and dandy for certain instances, but in others, it doesn't work like that. For anything to heal, there's a process. And one has to go through that entire process and come out on the other side of it. And if at some point it is disjointed or it cuts off, then it doesn't form a full healing. I guess let me then put it into specifics. I think in South Africa, specifically when it comes to behavior and interaction between different races and different people, there's different complexions. There are those who are on the extreme end, and I don't think whether black or white on those extreme ends, those people are able to find each other or make things better. But in the middle, there's all kinds of people with understanding and trying to work and make sure that we are a united people. So at interaction level, I would say things are a little bit better. Where I think we may have missed it a bit is that apartheid was systematic, and trying to deal with it in a let's see and let's get together and things will get better is that the system has shaped certain ways of doing things that you find that because those constructs have not been reshaped, certain things are still perpetuated. Let me give you a small example. Depending on where I live in this country, I pay more interest rate for my bond. And you would find that largely it's places like Soweto. And your insurance will also be higher. And so it means anyone who lives in that space will still experience the construct that said, those are the places that are marginalized. And that's why I'm saying that one is a little bit more systematic. So there needed to be a much deeper situation that says, how do we deal with the systematic stuff so that there isn't a natural tendency for things to go back to how they were before? Because then the outcome would always be the same as it was. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying it's a difficult one. I said last night, it's how do I compress this into a few minutes? Because it will be great for everybody to have a conversation around this. The third one. So, firstly, is how we interact with each other. I believe that's getting better. Secondly, is that there are things that are still systematic that were never dealt with. Thirdly, is that there was a a damage of the mind, if I may put it like that. And I'm not sure whether we had been deliberate as a country to say, how do we heal the mind so that how it processes and thinks about other people and other things is dealt with. I I hear you, Trevor, when you're saying all lives matter, and I agree with you there. I think probably the slogan maybe would have sounded better if it says all lives matter, Black lives matter too. Not so much as to say white lives don't matter, but as to say the current feeling is like there are things where when it comes to being a Black person, you feel like you don't matter just as much as a white person. I don't necessarily on my side always feel like that, because I think my Christian belief has helped for me to learn to heal, think differently, love people, because that's the command in the Bible, is that you love your neighbor, you love your people, you forgive, you become a better person, you don't become bitter. It's just that my Christianity allows me to heal in that way, to grow in that way. I'm not sure anyone else who doesn't have or hasn't been taught how to do that is able to do so. Yeah. Let me give you one simple construct. I've spoken about my mother before. My mother was a supervisor at work. She was a hard worker. She made so much money for the company that she worked for. But in all her life, she never had an increase. Her salary stayed at 700 Rand a week for a very long time. Now you can imagine, and the impact of that did not just end with her, but it continued, that she could therefore not do as much as she could for us. And so it also means that I have to also then fight as much to first pull myself, then pull everyone who's in the family, and then try and build for the next generation. Sure. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to. Yeah.
I think you've given us lots of food for thought there, and
Yeah.
you've really put a lot of thought and consideration into what you were going to say, and we really appreciate that. I think it's great input, and given us lots of points. And I think as one of the, I think Trevor popped in the chat box here, this is probably a discussion that is going to run over more than one session anyway. So I think I think it's a great start and a great way to kick it off with some deep thought, and really appreciate that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually pop across the ocean and get a completely different perspective, hopefully. So Kevin, I'm putting you on the spot. I'd love to hear what the feelings are in the UK, what the thoughts are. Are there issues around this where you live, and what is the general sentiment over there?
Thanks, Alvin. Yeah, I'm guessing things were a bit different over here than over there with your history compared with what ours has been. I feel personally that there's a lot too much hyped up with the media involved with the subject, in particular with events, with the violence, etc. that's going on. There's always a minority wherever you are, excuse me, a rogue element in the police or whatever it might be. And if you think it's only probably less than 100 years ago, nobody on this side of the pond would have heard what happened in Minnesota a couple of weeks ago. That's how things have changed. But yeah, the minority, there's always that rogue element with the riots, etc., and demonstrations that have been going on over here. You've got that minority tackling the police, making trouble when there's no real interest in the subject, which is what lets things down. I said the media, we had full coverage on the BBC of the memorial service yesterday. Now, again, I don't see anything like that coming along when the tables are turned and we've got a black situation attacking whites, for example, which happens. That doesn't make the news to the same degree. And there needs to be an evening up in my mind. Classic example with the riots at Bristol over the weekend, tearing down a statue 400 years ago had a bit of a link to slavery. Is a philanthropist since then and helped build Bristol itself. There's only one side of the story, but The real issue being all they're tearing down this statue while the police stood and watched. If it was a group of white people tearing down the statue, the police wouldn't have stood and watched. These things are what need to change in my mind. It needs to be a level playing field. And I don't think it'll ever happen because of the said minority. And coming back to what Trevor said, a very relevant point about all the different races on forms that you fill out. I do feel as well as a lot of that is caused by the very small minorities insisting on their presence being on said forms. You know what I mean? It's not quite to do with racism, but from a personal report when I'm running in the running club we're in, we've had dictats to us now that on race entry forms, just literally entering a race, there has to be a third option on the forms. You can't just have male and female anymore. You've got a non-binary. Yeah, so the word is going to extremes to cover the small minorities, and the majority tend to be sidelined more as much as the minorities these days. You know, so we could go on for hours on the subject, as Owen said, but that's what it's a bit like over here. It's not helped by the BBC and the media generally at all. We even had one of the members of Parliament in the riots at the weekend stirring it up. What's all that about? Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kevin. I think it's always good to get a completely different perspective, and another discussion that we can perhaps have sometime in the future is the role of the media and social media and all of these things, because I think they do play a massive role in influencing opinions across the spectrum, and the question is whether that's a free and a fair method of doing it, or whether it's highly biased. So I think another very interesting topic perhaps we can engage with at a later stage. So Solomon, you've got your hand up. Let's come across to you.
Morning, everybody. I must say it's a very difficult subject to really engage in, because I think each one of us, even within this wisdom, we've gone through different aspects of life. So each one of us, we do have a need to be able to grow in each aspect of our lives on how we respond to people that of a different race. Sometimes you don't realize where you act until you interact with people of a different race from yourself. So I think from my side, I'd just like to start by saying every human being wants to be accepted and wants to belong somewhere. And they actually want to know that they've got something to give. And I think a lot of the challenges that we have in our world come from where each one of us were raised and each one of us were born, and the values that each one of us have been given and things that has been passed on. So we've got extreme people out there that grew up in places where there was lots and lots of hostility. So it's not easy to try to convince that the group of those people, So sometimes a person cannot accept others because they have not been accepted within their own family. So they extend it more and more to everybody else out there. And I think just like Mpulelo, I've been able to experience just a peace and just a life from different kinds of sectors like churches, sport environments, school environments. Those are places that I feel you actually are able to meet different people, especially if you went to school and then you were in a multicultural school. Then you are able to really experience different perspectives and meet different people and begin to deal with yourself. So I personally think from where we are at, each one of us needs to grow in an ability to respond to others that are not the same races. But at the same time, I just feel even in this group, we're growing quite a lot. Yeah. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Solomon. Donovan, let's come get across.
Morning, everyone. I hope my sound is better. Thanks. Right. Yeah, there's a lot to say about this topic. It's very sensitive, but I would just like to touch 2 points. Following on what Trevor said about the classification that you still need to fill in when you do official business, etc. I'm actually also of the belief that it's not necessary, because race, if you really have to dig into it, scientifically it's been proven that race classification is unscientific. You basically need to stop at the classification of the human race, and what follows after that is just based on your community orientation, etc. But also on the other side, on a spiritual side, I also believe that you still need to deal with some of the issues which resulted from these classifications. I'm not sure if you know of well-known pastor Derek Prince. He actually said that there's a spirit behind the way some groups behave, especially blacks, how they are treated. So there is a real need to deal with
Donovan, unfortunately, we seem to have lost you there sort of mid-sentence. Not sure if you're still with us, but it looks like your picture is also frozen. Are you still there? Donovan, I'm afraid we've...
this first of all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Donovan.
Right.
Right, I haven't been ignoring the ladies, I promise. Let's get across to Nazipo. Let's kick off with you there.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. I think you said this topic continues after today as well, which is great, because I do think there is a lot to be said around the topic. I think just my thoughts around this issue is that, firstly, the Black Lives Matter comes out of the whole racism debate, and the racism debate, it's a global reality. It's real. It's there. I went to multiracial schools as well. I think when I was in what's now called grade 9 or something to that effect, and it was always there from the time you were at school all the way up. What I've come to all the way to now, because even my son, I see him go through some of the things I went through. What I've come to realize, though, is that it's a choice. Racism is a choice. It's a certain belief that individuals would have, and it's centered around feelings of superiority over another race. And because it's a choice, it's then more individual based. That's why you will find individuals who choose not to be racist and individuals who choose to to be stuck on being racist. And I think what's important, what I've come to learn, is that we are all human before we are our different races. And if we were to approach each other at that stage, we probably would. Although I don't know how much of a difference it would make to preach to people to stop being racist where they feel they can be racist. Because you need to remember that back in the olden days, racism was instilled on people. People were initiated into being racist. There were cases where they would have to go through, if you were found to be treating Black people equally or in a certain manner, you would be punished for that. people would be burned because of that. And if it was instilled in that way, you can't just say that a few pronouncements are suddenly going to make sure that it goes away. And as Mbulelo said earlier, it's not something that everybody would be able to let go of just like that. It's probably something that, because people were initiated into it, they might have to be initiated out of it. That's my belief on it. And, you know, in terms of the George Floyd situation, my heart tears. But, you know, when we come to the Black Lives Matter, and I agree with, I think it was Trevor that spoke about that all lives matter. They do. I just think that, though, the fact that at this stage we are still, as humanity, trying to distinguish between which lives in particular matter, that alone is an issue. But, you know, ultimately we need to understand that these are humans, and humans by their very nature are flawed, regardless of whether we are black or white or whatever. It's just, humans can be exhausting sometimes. Just, you know, all of us as human beings can be exhausting. And it becomes, like, I take it upon myself to make sure that I get, for example, my kids protected from experiencing certain things. You know, last year I had to switch my child from a beautiful school that I really loved, Waterfall College, because, you know, those infuriating comments that I would keep picking up. And I sat and thought, whilst they try very hard, it's there, it's glaring. And if I can feel it, and my son is there every day, I don't want him growing up with that kind of hatred. So I had to uproot him from school and change him into a different school where the environment was different. And, you know, these are things that we constantly have to do, because it's there, it's every day you see it. But it becomes up to you as an individual that's either experiencing it or teaching it, to understand that people are not the same. And sometimes people approach other people in that way because we fear. What we don't know, we fear. It's easier for people that have come to understand the different races and cultures to be more comfortable with them, because you no longer have that fear. Because once you don't know about the other culture, you fear them. And when you fear something, there's a whole lot you can do to destroy that which you don't know. I think I'll end there. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Nzipo. Yeah, some really good points there as well. I appreciate that. So, Steve, let's get across to you.
Thanks, Ivan. Sure, I've also, what Mpumelelo said earlier, it resonated so deeply with me, the idea of being up all hours of the night and trying to think deeply over this topic and these issues. As Trevor says, it's a global issue that we're facing. And Nzipo was saying the same, as a human race. I think for now, I'll just talk personally. I think that's probably the most helpful from my perspective. I've had some learning moments in life where I've had to face things within me that have shown my unconscious bias, my worldviews that I hadn't deconstructed, that I wasn't aware of yet. Some of those I have been helped with from people who, from the outside of my cultural context, and even from my growing up context, have been able to see me in different ways and have been able to help me see myself that way. And it's been very painful. And it's been very, very difficult to see parts of myself, for example, the indoctrinated racism that I grew up with. And I think my family were incredibly liberal. And it was a hard day when I realized that my father was actually quite a racist, even though he fought as much for many other people. You know, that's what I experienced, these incredibly complex contradictions that Trevor spoke of earlier. I can remember one day stopping at a robot and seeing a white beggar, and I was absolutely shocked. And that was another moment of illumination for me, when I realized my unconscious bias towards people in this world. That if you asked me consciously, I would say, no, I don't view people that way. But obviously I did. And those have been incredibly difficult to root out, and I'm still continuing the work in trying to root those out. I know when I work with couples, when we do marriage work, and it's something that my wife and I use, there's a position that you adopt in a marriage couple where you start to locate the issue sort of separate to the two people, because otherwise what happens in most marriage conflict is the two people are fighting against each other as if they're the enemy. And as soon as you can help them to stand side by side and see the issue in some way exterior to themselves, although it's also internalized within each one, they're able to come together and face the problem rather than trying to pick on each other as if each other is the problem. And that is the perspective that I'm trying to adopt at the moment. That if we're able to come alongside each other and to look at the issue, then we don't attack each other as enemies. We can see each other as resources and as friends towards eradicating issues like this. And so I'm trying to take that on in myself, so that when somebody comes and says something hard to me, when a person of color says to me, you know, Steve, you behaved like a racist, I don't have to feel attacked. I can rather adopt the position of, okay, this person's actually on my side. And if I can stand next to them and I can listen to them deeply about what they're trying to tell me, I might actually learn something really helpful about myself and about the way in which the world is functioning. And I think, unfortunately, white people specifically, we seem to have an issue with listening deeply to people from different contexts. And I know that is a horrific generalization, but I'm still going to put it out there. And so I'm trying to move away from that and trying to adopt that position of listening. It's a long answer, but like Mpumelelo, this is such a complex issue. There's so many things I'd want to say, speak to the social conditioning and the indoctrination and everything else, but I think I'll leave it at my lived experience. Thanks guys for the conversation. These kinds of things for me make it worthwhile to get up in the morning. This is what life is really about. So I appreciate being a part of this with you guys.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and we have gone past the bottom of the hour, but I don't want to cut people out. As I say, I think we will pick this up again tomorrow. But I'm going to go to the folk I haven't given a chance yet, just to add in some thoughts for today. And if I can ask you, if you wouldn't mind just keeping it short, and I'll come to you first tomorrow again, and then we'll pick it up from there. So let's get to Sally first.
Morning, guys. This is such an interesting topic. I've actually never put as much thought in it as I am now, with all the things that you guys are talking about. So my experience, my life experience, I can only speak from my life experience. I want to say, Norzy, thank you for what you said. I actually didn't. It's very true what you say. I think it's conditioned, and I don't think that everybody understands what the way the conditioning has happened. And then also, Steve, I want to say thank you for you as well. Because I remember when the first time I saw a white beggar, I was actually quite shocked, because that's, I grew up in a very, my parents weren't at all racist, so I didn't grow up with that mentality. So, and I just grew up assuming that this is how things work. And I was, and I think that the day that I saw that beggar, I will never forget it. It's almost, my eyes were open. It's like, but it's people are people. People go through bad situations. And for me, I think the media, Ivan, has a lot to do with what is going on at the moment. It's a lot is being sensationalized, because my feelings are everybody's lives matter. If we think about for example, the farm murders that are just going on here, why isn't that also out there? So it's just, I think also it's like Ivan, the media, I think definitely has a big part in it. So that is, those are my thoughts. I'm just loving this conversation though, because I'm changing my mindset the whole time. Thanks, guys.
Right, thanks, Sally. Stella, let's get across to you.
Morning, everyone. Yes, this is a very difficult and sensitive topic to everyone, I think. I think what stands out for me is to acknowledge that there is a healing process that needs to happen, I think, on both sides. If you think of apartheid, on both whites and blacks. And I think it is also a matter of acknowledging for whites as well, the what was your part in apartheid or in classification or stereotyping of people. And the thought of, like an alcoholic that acknowledges and say, okay, I admit that this is the problem that I've got, especially if you are biased towards other race groups. And it goes for me to both sides, black and white. And then to work through that healing process, I think it is, there's a lot of hurt, especially on black side. And only, I think if you go through the healing process and to get to the point of forgiveness, and I'm now taking that back to going through a divorce process as well, of divorce where you've got hurt that you need to deal with. And the same with apartheid. I think it's a whole process that needs to be addressed on individual basis for people, but to do it on a global scale. And I think it starts at home, working through your own issues with racism, and to install that in your immediate surroundings. And but it's a very difficult topic, and I don't have the answers for a solution, but I think I can relate to everybody, what everybody has said this morning, but I think there is much more to be said on this topic.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Stella. Jasper, let's get across to you quickly. As I say, we are running well over, but we definitely will.
I'll rather carry on tomorrow, Ivan.
Okay, thanks. Cecile, some thoughts from you before we wrap up?
Yes, I can only talk from my own personal environment. I grew up in an all-white school. We didn't even have other races, we didn't even have Greeks or Jews or anything like that in our school. Everyone was Afrikaans. So that was my point of reference. And we never had a domestic servant either. My mom used to work in the house, but my dad, he worked with race relations. So he fought for his whole, that I can remember, life, for black people to have better jobs or equal pay jobs or whatever he was doing. So that's where I come from. But I know that we, just like Steve said, we are also we were indoctrinated growing up, although you don't even know that. Only later in life do you realize where your points of reference are, even if you think that you're not a racist yourself. And then growing up in my adulthood, doing sport, luckily we integrated quite a lot with people of color in the squash teams and in the athletics. And I was in awe, because in those early days, the black athletes were fantastic. They were absolutely superb. So I was always in awe with black athletes and what they can achieve with how little they have in the line of training and that kind of stuff. And when we toured around the world with squash, I toured with two black guys all across the world, and then I got to know them as people. And in my last 15 years, I sit side by side daily, 5 days a week with, so I can say I can't say I know black people, I know Zulu people, because Zama, my PA, is a Zulu. And Zulus see the life differently than Tswanas and Sothos and all these other, all other South African nationalities. But I sit side by side with Zama, my PA, every single day. So I understand where they come from, what she thinks in her life. Even we've got such a close relationship that she is in my will. She is actually inheriting some of my properties, because I want to look after her and her family when I'm not around anymore. So I don't see myself as a racist, but I know we all inherently are a little bit of a racist, even though we don't live it.
Great, thanks, Cecile. Herman, let's get across to you. And as I know you've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of input on this topic. So if I can ask you just to make one or two short comments, then we'll wrap up this morning and we'll pick up with you in the morning again, if that's okay.
Fine. Just to start off with, I had a father who was a Nazi. And when I eventually realized what the Nazis did, believe you me, I had, anyway, it disturbed me largely. The one statement I would like, and I want to throw the cat amongst the pigeon, the one thing I do not agree as far as racism is concerned, that only white people can be racist. And I'm not making it a white and black issue, not at all. I'm making it a general issue based on experience and knowledge I've had, having had the opportunity to live on 3 different continents in various countries, and I was exposed to different cultures. But I do have a strong feeling and opinion about racism, as you possibly got the impression, and I'm willing to share it tomorrow. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Herman. I appreciate your points there, and thanks for keeping it short. And we will definitely pick this up tomorrow. So everyone, yeah, really appreciate the thought that's gone into the conversation this morning, the integrity with which it's been and the manner with which it's been handled. So really appreciate that, and really looking forward to picking up the discussions going forward. So have a fantastic day further, and we'll see you guys in the morning. Cheers now.